Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to you. My name is Chris Burr and I'm based here at St. Paul's as the tutor in ministerial development. I'm part of the CMD team here, and helping me run the webinar this afternoon are two of my colleagues, Veronica Cottam and Jennifer Riggs. So welcome to Veronica and Jennifer particularly. Now, the countdown to Christmas has well and truly begun. There are just 39 days to go and only 13 days until the beginning of Advent. I think you can just see my colleagues coming up there. We can just catch up with that. There we are. There's Veronica and Jennifer. And as I say, just 39 days to go until Christmas. For those of us in ministry, we know that this key season is going to look and feel very different this year, both for us and for our churches. To try and help us to explore some of the challenges and the opportunities, we decided to hold these two webinars on Christmas. The first one, led by Dr. Sandra Miller, was held last Monday. And a recording of that can be found on the St. Paul's website if you missed it. Today, our second webinar is a very practical one, and we hope to be offering lots of ideas and resources to help you to plan for Christmas in your own church and in your own context. We've called it Christmas Reimagined. Now, I'm delighted today that I'm joined by no less than 7 contributors. You'll see the names on the screen there and what they'll all be talking about. So a particularly warm welcome this afternoon to Matthew Batten, Bishop Andy John, Sue Huyton, Paulette Gower, Sally Humble-Jackson, Di Woolridge, and Jane Nattrass. Now, many of you will have attended one of these webinars before, but please bear with me as I briefly run through the format, not only because some will be joining us for the first time today, but also because we've changed things just slightly. As I said, we have 7 contributors today, and each of them have some great ideas and resources to share. So the presentation part of the webinar will take just a little longer, so 55 minutes if all of that goes to plan, and that will be followed by our usual Q&A session, which to finish at 3:15 will need to be just about 20 minutes long. But if we have lots of questions today, then we might decide to extend the webinar just by 10 minutes. But I appreciate some of you will need to leave by 3:15, as will some of our speakers. So we'll just play it by ear as we go along, if that's okay. Please don't worry during the webinar if in the background your dog starts barking, your children start running around, or the Amazon man starts knocking on the door. Other than contributors and facilitators, you will automatically be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have a question for any of our speakers at any time, you can post those in the Q&A function on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. And we'll use as many of those in the Q&As at the end as we can. We may not be able to use all of them, but we will do our best. And you can post a question anonymously if you prefer. Alternatively, you might want to share a comment as we go along. And if that's the case, then you can post these in the chat facility. You can control who sees your post in the chat box itself. You can post a message just for panelists, but most people choose to want to share their comment with everybody else. If that's the case, just click on all panelists and attendees, as you can see on the screen there. Don't panic if your toolbar disappears, if it fades out. It is meant to do so when it's inactive. So to bring it back, just move your mouse, touch the mouse pad, or touch your screen, depending on what equipment you're using this afternoon. And if you miss anything today, or if you want to revisit anything that somebody said, again, don't panic. The webinar is being recorded and can be viewed at any time via the St. Paul's website. And Veronica and Jen will be posting details of how to do that as we go along. We hope to get today's recording uploaded in the next couple of days for you. Finally, you'll automatically receive a feedback request via email in the next couple of days. It really is very short and very straightforward, but we'd be extremely grateful if you could take a moment to do that. We check through everyone and they're invaluable in helping us plan for future webinars. Now, there are over 100 registered for our webinar this afternoon, so you'll appreciate why we can't make the format any more interactive than it is. It's a webinar and not a Zoom meeting, and therefore your own face will not appear on screen. It'll just be the panelists as they speak. So I'm going to be back a little bit later to help facilitate the Q&As, as I said, but high time we introduced our first contributor for this afternoon, who's no stranger to us here at St. Padans. Matthew Batten is the Director for Communications and Outreach in the Diocese of Llandaff. Matt, it's really good to have you back with us this afternoon. And Matt, you're going to be talking about Advent. And I should just say, Matt's unable to stay around for the duration of the webinar. So if you've got questions for Matt, then please post those questions and I'll put those to him as we go along. So Matt, it's over to you.
Well, thank you, Chris. Diolch yn fawr. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all having a good start to your week. Yeah, I'm Matt. I work for the Diocese of Llandaff Communications and Outreach, and I'm going to be sharing with you some of the things that we've got planned as a diocese for to celebrate Advent, and also some tips at the end on how I think are the best ways to communicate what you're doing, because we could all have the best ideas in the world, but we also need people to know and respond and be part of our church community during Christmas and Advent, and especially as there's a lot going on this year, and we want to make sure that Christmas becomes that time and of celebration, and that we use Advent as an opportunity to look ahead and prepare for the coming of Christ, and also for the year ahead as well. So I'm going to share with you a couple of things that we've got planned, and I'm going to start off with something that we've been planning for quite a while now, and that's our Advent Day of Prayer. So this takes place on Saturday, the 5th of December, 10 till 4, and we'll be using our Facebook Live for doing that. The reason for doing a day of prayer is because we wanted to start Advent off with a big event that involves as many people as possible. I think when you set an intention to almost launch the Advent season, it's really worth getting together and thinking about a big diocesan-wide event that people can be part of for that one day, so you're able to impart that feeling that Advent this year is going to be especially it's going to be especially meaningful after the difficulties of 2020. The way that we're going to be doing Day of Prayer, we used to work with Diocese of Monmouth for an in-person Day of Prayer, but obviously we can't this year. So we wanted to make sure that we were still able to offer something for people who were looking for an opportunity for quietness, stillness, and reflection. So we've got about 10 people contributing to Day of Prayer, and we'll be doing it through live interaction, but also through videos. And the theme is around preparing hope and darkness into light. So it's going to be a mixture of people telling their stories of how they've shone a light throughout 2020. It's going to be people like Tristan Hughes, who's a lecturer at St. Padans as well, sharing reflections on Advent for people to get to be part of. And also then we've got Citizen Church, which is our church plant, who are going to be doing some Christmas worship songs for us as well. So it's almost replicating a live event, a live Advent event, but online. And I just want to highlight something that we're going to be using. We are going to be using Zoom because I think everyone is familiar with Zoom, but also we're going to be using something called Restream. And that's Restream, because we are aiming to broadcast this as far and wide as possible. So Facebook's our primary audience, but also we're going to be restreaming it over on YouTube as well. And the reason for that is because YouTube gives us a very different audience. Facebook is our existing audience. So those of us who know us, who are part of our community, who are part of parishes, who know about the Diocese of Llandaff. YouTube then is a whole different different audience. It's not our congregation. It's outside of our building. It's outside of our congregation, which is why we are making sure that anything that we live stream is aimed in particular at people who are not necessarily within our church buildings. Christmas is very much a time for reaching out, and we want to carry on doing that. So Advent Day of Prayer starts for us, and if you are starting to plan Advent, I would encourage you to think of a big launch event as well. Let's make Advent something incredibly special this year and invite people to it. Using Zoom is a good opportunity, but also let's hear from people across the diocese, which is what we're planning on doing. We are also doing something that came up in a conversation called Doorstep Carols, where we're asking people to join together every Sunday night at 7 p.m. to sing some carols. We'll be selecting some carols for people to sing on that Sunday at 7 p.m. But the reason for doing that is we were thinking about, well, how do you reach out to your neighbours who would probably have gone to a carol service, because we all love a Victorian sing-song, carol sing-song. But we were thinking, well, how can we do that safely and in big numbers? So we've been thinking of doorstep carols, and at 7 p.m. on Sundays, we're inviting our neighbours in our street to come out on our doorstep, a bit like what we're doing with what we did with key workers during lockdown, and sing 2 or 3 carols from our doorstep. We already know that some of our neighbours, and I know about 2 streets in particular, there's some musicians on there who are going to be setting themselves up as doing some doorstep carols with musicians and live music as well. So we're really, really pushing the idea of nostalgia and carols this time of year, because I think that's what people are going to miss during Advent, is the uncertainty of going to carols. We're very fortunate here now that the Llandaff Cathedral will be live streaming, hopefully in time for Christmas. But then there's a recognition that our churches are not going to be as packed as they should be at Christmas. So how do we do that outdoors, and how do we do that safely? And doorstep carols is one of the things that we're offering. I'm not going to say too much about darkness into light, because this is what Bishop Andy is going to be talking about. And when you hear some of the things that he's going to be talking about, you'll realise that it's such a wonderful theme to get involved in. And we're particularly excited that we're going to be really going all out with this theme of darkness into light, of sharing some really good, amazing stories from across the diocese during Advent. And the way we're doing this, and this isn't taking anything away from what Bishop Andy will be saying, is we'll be doing an Advent calendar. Every day of Advent, we will be sharing a story related to Christmas. It could be a prayer, it could be a poem, but it's going to involve our people from across the diocese, because I think people tend to respond well to real people. And I know that some Advent calendars online tend just to be, you know, like a Bible quote, and that's nice and everything. But let's use people. Let's use our people who have done some amazing stuff with us this year, and we want to share their voices, and we're going to be sharing their stories of how they've been shining darkness into light. But it's a fantastic thing for the Church in Wales to do, and I'm so thrilled and I'm so pleased that the Church in Wales has picked up on a theme this year that is so pertinent to all that we're feeling. So we're very, very excited about getting involved in that as well. And just to end my little 10-minute session, I just want to share with you how I think you should go about sharing Advent and Christmas, because you're going to hear a lot more now over the next 50 minutes from people who have got ideas, some brilliant ideas of what you could be doing during Advent. But the thing that we really need to bear in mind is that we've got to share these events very well online, because that's how we're going to reach people. Now, the first thing I'd like to say is about using Facebook events. Now, I'm surprised how not as many churches as I think should don't use Facebook events. Facebook events, if you don't know, is basically Facebook's calendar. So if you have a carol service or you have an Advent event or what have you, make sure you set it up in Facebook events. It's not good enough just to create a poster and post it to your social media and post it to Facebook, because algorithms and how Facebook works, it'll just keep going lower and lower and lower down in the priority. So people may miss it. If you create a Facebook event, it means it's in everyone's calendar, essentially, who is a friend of yours on Facebook, who is a friend of yours or has liked your page or group. So when I say, yes, I'm going to Advent Day of Prayer in the Llandaff Cathedral, all my friends can then see that I'm going on the 5th of December to the Advent Day of Prayer. It's another way of advertising your event outside of your congregation and using friends and family. Please, please set your events to use Facebook events. It's really important to get that community message of invites out there, because people do use Facebook to start planning their what they're doing for Christmas. They're always looking at what events are on that they can take the kids to. So please do use Facebook events. The other thing I would say is invite friends and family. Now, we don't, one thing I'd like to sort of stress is that use social networks really, really well. So when your congregation, you're telling your congregation about events that you've got put on, whether it's Christingle, carol services, carols on the doorstep, set an intention and ask them to share that with friends and family and invite them. It's not enough for people just to find the event. You've got to push that out wider. So please do use your friends and family and ask them to invite their friends and family. So the word of Christmas and Advent goes far and wide. It's how social media works. We like conversations and we like sharing stuff. And if people see that an event, you're interested in an event in your church, other people might click interested as well. You've then got this captured audience of beyond your congregation. And my final point as well, which clearly I can't spell this afternoon, is create not ye-catching designs, but eye-catching designs using Canva. Now, the Day of Advent Prayer that I showed you earlier, that was created in Canva, and the one that we did for a vocations course coming up is created in Canva. I'm not a graphic designer, but Canva offers you a lot of social media design templates that you can use for your Christmas events and share those. You can create posters, you can create Twitter posts, Instagram posts, Facebook posts. So I would encourage you to go to canva.com, search Christmas poster and use some of the templates in there, put your logo on it, but really go out and make Christmas eye-catching, because I think we've got an amazing story of hope, and we want to get as many people to come to our events and be part of our community as we can. We would normally do this in person, but obviously it's a bit difficult. So we've now got to be very aesthetic and visual in sharing what we have got on for Advent and Christmas. I think, because Chris has just come on, that's my 10 minutes up, but I am happy to take any questions which I think have popped in along the way.
I was hoping to do that very discreetly, Matt.
Not at all. It was basically...
No, that's fine. So just as I said, we appreciate that you need to go today, and I really appreciate your time. But there are a couple of questions and a couple of comments that I would like. One from Felicity. She said, obviously Advent will be very different this year, and we're unfortunately not able to hold an Advent service in our church, but I've been invited to a local school to do a talk about Advent there. Was wondering if you've any ideas how to go about this. Is this a practical idea about approaching schools and see what we're able to do this year, perhaps?
Yeah, I think so, because from what I can gather talking to the education team, and it might be worth, Felicity, having a chat with whoever runs your education section, whichever diocese you're in, is the education team have got, from across the church in Wales, are doing something called Tithe Advent, where it's Advent Journey, and they've got loads and loads of resources aimed at primary schools and I think secondary schools as well. So they're doing something very specific for schools. So it might be worth speaking to whoever leads on your education section and seeing what you could use that they've prepared, because they're doing it all about refugee and journey and they've got loads and loads of resources. But I do think it's worth engaging with schools because they're up against it as well. They're looking for ideas. So yeah, definitely think it's a good idea.
Okay. Question here from William. Doorstep carols. You may have already addressed this, Matt. How are you communicating the event and how do people join in? Is it through Facebook, for example?
So doorstep carols, obviously people go out on their doorstep physically to do it, but what we in the diocese are doing is, one, we've set up a Facebook event, and at the moment I've got 103 people who have signed up to it, and that only went live, I think, last week sometime. The second thing we're doing is creating flyers for people to print out. We're going to be asking parishes to print out flyers and ask their congregations either to print them out at home or just deliver them through people's doors in their doorstep in their neighbourhood. So that's one way of doing it. But also because of that key worker element, I think people are looking for something similar to do. So we are going to be doing a local press release as well. But the other thing I know is quite big where I live and in the Cardiff area, and it's probably similar elsewhere, is local community groups on Facebook. So Grangetown, for example, where I live, has got something like 3,000 people in that group. 3,000 people do not come to St. Paul's in Grangetown. Sorry to break the news, but they don't. So I'm going to be posting in there. And I'm going to be saying to them, you know, you'd normally come and do a sing-song in a pub, or you'd come and do sing-songs in church. How about do it on your doorstep? And then I'll be inviting all the neighbours. So yeah, making use of neighbour and some old-fashioned flyers through the door for that one.
Yeah, it's about getting ourselves known, I think, isn't it, Matt? And not
Yeah.
This year more than any other year. It's not just a case of waiting for people to come to church. It's a case of going out to the community, which is a great opportunity, actually.
It's a fantastic opportunity. We can't just assume people are going to pass through our doors in the numbers that they would anymore. So we've got to make a real intentional effort to use whatever method we can.
Few things on chat here, Matt.
Oh yeah.
Both Caroline and Bishop Andy were talking about Diwali and the fact that, you know, it's great to see how they've reimagined Diwali this year as we're reimagining Christmas. So it's worth taking a look at some of those. If you look on chat, there are some various things posted in there. Gaynor from St. David's has said, you know, there are things that they're doing as a diocese, and I've noticed there are other comments from other dioceses. Presumably, Matt, people can get in touch with you if they'd like to hook into some of the resources that you've got.
Yeah, you know, we're not precious about anything that we're creating or designing. So if there's anything that you think would be useful, you can have the resources. We can take our logo off it, and you can add your diocesan or church logo. Honestly, I'm not precious about it. The more we share as a church in Wales, the more we can all help each other. So please do just drop me a line. I'm more than happy to help.
Okay, as I said, keep a look at chat, because there's some really good ideas and different information about what other dioceses are doing. One final question for you, Max. I know you need to go. A question from William. Any ideas for those of our congregation who are not on the internet? What can we do for them for Advent this year?
That's a really good one. And I don't think it's necessarily thinking everything has to be done digitally, because when's the last time anyone here has received a letter? See, it's just one of those things we don't often get anymore. What I think would be a wonderful thing to do would be to write letters to people who are not online, who are not in digital, and maybe you write a prayer or you post something through their letterbox. There are ways of keeping people in touch, and some activities for Advent. You know, there's word searches, there's prayers. You know, posting those to people's doorstep. One of our churches doing Christingle in a bag, for example, which I'm sure is not an unusual idea, but little gift things like that you can actually give somebody on their doorstep. And actually, instead of standing on your own doorstep, stand on their doorstep and sing to them from the other side of the door if they can't get out to it. Why not? I'm sure they used to do it in Dickens' day, didn't they?
I'm just the thought of me singing to anybody on their doorstep is not really what they want for Christmas, Matt. But
oh yeah, I won't. I'll be miming.
It's just a great visual. Look, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Some really practical ideas. And as Matt said, if you'd like to get in touch with Matt about any of the ideas that he's mentioned, and this has been recorded, and we'll have some links as well for the information that Matt has put. But thank you ever so much, Matt, and have a good rest of the afternoon.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Matt. And Matt talked very briefly there, made mention of the Church in Wales initiative, Darkness to Light. I'm delighted that Bishop Andy is able to join us this afternoon. Welcome, Bishop Andy, and you're going to talk a little bit more about this initiative for us.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Matt. That was a really excellent presentation. Delighted to see what's happening in Llandaff Diocese. And I'm one of those who wants to sort of mix and match if there's any way in which we can use good practice and borrow examples, all to the good. Thank you, Veronica. You've shared the screen, which is there. Just going to get that up properly so we can see the proper layout of Darkness to Light. This is the provincial initiative. I'm not sure if that's, are you getting that right, Veronica?
Sorry, 1 second, Bishop Andy, it's closed on me.
Ah, typical. I'll just pause a moment to see if you can get that right before I jump in and start talking about the initiative which is there. If you have any difficulties, let me know. I might be able to screen share from my end.
There we are. We should now be ready.
There we are. That's great. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Who'd have thought we'd be here? Who'd have thought that we'd have known what Zoom was just a few months ago? But the impact of COVID-19 upon us all has been extraordinary. And there is no apology at all for the provincial initiative, which seeks to draw upon that and bring into some of the darkness of this current stage of our life as a nation, and perhaps even as a church, some of the light of Jesus Christ, because we do believe that this is a moment of opportunity for us as a church, and that with every challenge and within every obstacle, there comes an opportunity. And so I've just taken as a way in to our course the strap line which is there. We're living our lives as never before, distance from each other, anxious, uncertain, fearful, sick and grieving. Many feel the shadows of darkness and despair all around them. And so our Darkness into Light campaign aims to draw people to the light, the pure light we find in Christ's message of salvation for all and its reflection through the love and good works of those around us. With love for those around us, we can help bring the light into dark corners, be inspired, bear the torch, be a light to others. So I want to say a little bit about this initiative, but just make it clear at the first instance, this is not a course. You won't find written material, but there is enough about the initiative that if you want to do something that's homegrown, certainly when it comes to the torchbearers material, you may find that you can construct your own course, which will enable you to make something more of the initiative than you might otherwise do. So where was the inspiration for this course? Where did it come from? Slide number 2, Veronica, if I could. Comes left field, comes very strangely. It comes from Governor B. Some of you will know the rapper, Governor B. And his inspiration was from a scripture, which was Psalm 18, verse 28. You, Lord, keep my lamp burning. My God turns my darkness into light. This was initially intended to be part of the 2020 celebrations and the launch really of some of our life stories material, which would have been great. That's not been possible in 2020, but it may at the end of our year be a way in to something that is no less profound. Governor B reminds us that whenever the church has faced a difficult time, it's always been at its best when it's been on the back foot. I've been reflecting recently on Paul's letter to the Philippians. You'll know that Paul wrote that from a jail, almost certainly in Rome. And what he found was that as he was shackled and he was deprived of his liberty, he found that he was more empowered and more able to share the faith of Christ than ever before, because it was as a result of his chains that people heard more and more about the gospel. So with that in mind, we believe that this time, this gives us as a church an opportunity to speak into the public space about some of the things that the church is doing, which can only bring light and life. Next slide, please, Veronica. We're kicking it off and we're inviting the church to join us every day at 6 o'clock with a prayer. And if we start and mark Advent with this prayer here, then it may well be that one of the most important things we can offer our nation at the moment is that they know that we are praying for them. How many times have we found that whenever we've tried our level best to share something of Christ with our friends, our neighbours, to no avail, but when we've asked them, would they like us to pray for them? Something profound has been unlocked. That act of love and giving has been instrumental in helping them open up about their life. So every evening, starting from Advent Sunday, this is the prayer that we are offering. We're offering it as an act of love from the church to Wales at the moment. I wonder whether you might be able to join us and to make a commitment, you, your churches, your friends, your neighbours, to pray this prayer every day throughout Advent for the sake of Wales. And maybe that, as I say, is the single biggest thing that darkness into light will be able to offer. It starts with an inspiration and it leads to prayer. Veronica, next slide, please, if I could. People love stories, don't they? They want to know, what are the stories of hope? And the initiative that we're putting up, I think today it goes live, gives a task, which is to tell good news stories, stories of those who bring light. So let me tell you a little story. Unashamedly, it's from my diocese because that's one of the ones I'm most familiar with. One of our clerics has recently become involved in the local RNLI. And that means having a pager. That means being prepared to leave the comfort of your bed at all times of night and to go out and to be part of an operation to save people on the north of Anglesey. The ministry that has been exercised there is not just to those who are in trouble on the sea, but because the church has taken its ministry to those who share that responsibility, to those who are also engaged in trying to save lives. People have seen that Christian faith has traction on the ground, and it's been a way in which faith naturally has been expressed and conversations opened. There are stories from people who are involved in food banks. There are stories in our torchbearers of people who are involved in delivering packages to those in need. So you may well find that all of this material enables you to package something together and ask your church, what are the good news stories that we can share with our community, the way in which the church is bringing light into dark places. It's not creedal, it's not fundamentally ecclesiological, it's simply a set of good news stories which we can share or shape as seems good. Veronica, could I have the next slide, please? A task gives us an opportunity. We're grateful to the Archbishop, who will be presenting on behalf of all of us an Advent message. All of the bishops have been accustomed to doing that, but we've asked our Archbishop if he can take responsibility to say something to all of Wales on behalf of the Church in Wales at the start of Advent. All of our cathedrals are going to be lit up throughout the whole of the Advent period. A small gesture, but a symbolic one of saying that even in these dark winter months, there is light and there is life. The bishops have agreed that they will make all of their Christmas messages the darkness into light theme, so that we are one, even though we'll be sharing individually in our Christmas messages and in our cathedral and our Christmas services. It will be that darkness into light message which we'll be wanting to share. So there's a sense in which, even though we are 6 dioceses, we're doing something together, and we think that that's important. Veronica, next slide, please. Matt had flagged up to us the Christmas Eve Carols initiative. Wouldn't it be brilliant? Right, that's what people want over Christmas. More than anything else, they want to be able to sing carols. And if they could hear Christians singing something of their trust in the word that was made flesh, I think that would be a brilliant witness. And again, something that we could bring to our nation. So I just want to encourage you to be part of the Christmas Eve Carols initiative, and hope that that brings some joy to you and some joy to your neighbours as well. If there are thousands of Christians doing that on Christmas Eve, I think we'd have done something good and holy. So Darkness into Light, an initiative which involves all of the dioceses of the Church in Wales, inspired by Governor B. It's something which all of our bishops and our churches are invited to participate. I do hope that you can find some material there that's good for you and for your congregations. Chris, that's me done within 10 minutes. Again, if there are comments or questions, I'm happy to receive those now.
Thank you, Bishop Andy. Really appreciate that. What you wouldn't have been able to see probably as you were speaking was the number of people posting in the chat box some really good ideas of their own as well as this initiative. One thing that strikes me, Bishop, this year more than ever, there seems to be a real willingness to do things collaboratively. Do you think this could almost be a breakthrough year?
I think that has been a good feature. It's been an excellent idea, and I want to pay tribute to the provincial staff who saw this as an opportunity for us to do something together. We're always living with a tension, aren't we? Some people want to hear from their bishop, and they don't want to hear from anyone else. But I think at this time, when there is something that is affecting all of Wales, it's important that the church in Wales does something together. So I really welcome this initiative. I think it's excellent and good for Wales to know that we're praying for them. If there is some takeaway into the future, I'd be up for that. But let's just focus to begin with in and on Advent, and particularly the situation we're facing at the moment.
There's a post by Catherine Evans. She said it's about good news people in a bad news world, and but a lot of fake news around as well. I mean, Christmas is our time of year, isn't it, Bishop? This is the time where we really stand up and speak truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got 2 Advent calendars already upstairs, just waiting. And one of them is Maltesers, and one of them I think is a Simpsons one. I don't know what I've done to deserve that. I'm hoping that I'm not being parallel to Homer in any way here. But the grit of Christmas, is of a child who was born in an outpost in Palestine. It's about how God steps into the reality of life. And if ever there was a time when we've got something to say, that in the midst of some really challenging life, we're here with the love of God, now is that moment. And now is the moment for us to grasp this, to cael gafael in y Gymraeg, get hold of it and say, we are here. And I think this is our moment. And
that strapline, Darkness into Light, that will resonate with people at the moment, I think, won't it? After the
the darkness of all around us, the darkness that people are feeling. And I heard today, Chris, that a student in Bangor University, 19 years of age, has died because of COVID. There are people who need to know that in the midst of bleakness, there is something that will not shift, that will not move. It's the eternal love of God. And we need that. And we need to tell that and share that clearly.
Absolutely. So just where can people access these resources? Is that through the main Church in Wales website?
Yeah, indeed. I've been told by Mike and Anna and Leon that material goes live today. If it's not there now, it will be by the end of the day.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, not just for what you've had to say, but for your encouragement as well. We really appreciate your time.
You're welcome, Chris.
Again, as Bishop Andy said, if those resources are not on the website today, they will be in the next couple of days. But that's something all of us across the province can plug into and get that message out there, that in the midst of what's been a particularly dark and difficult year,
Yeah. Chris, thanks for what you're doing here. It's really important. Well done, you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
You're welcome.
And Sue Huyton, where are you, Sue? There we are. You're going to bring us a little bit about what you're doing as a ministry area and as a church, and particularly looking at Christingle. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Brilliant. Good to have you with us, Sue.
Okay, well, I'm Sue Huyton. I minister to 4 villages just south of Wrexham. And when I came here 6 years ago, I discovered that crib and Christingle, which they have united, are big things on Christmas Eve. And I was wondering quite what I could do when the village church where I live usually has over 200 people in it at the crib and Christingle. So of course we can't do that. And we were talking as missionary leaders, and somebody mentioned messy church in a bag. So I said, as obviously one of Matt's colleagues has, why don't we do a Christingle in a bag? So I've ordered a set of little mini carrier bags, although one of my churches, they've made their own from material with pictures of the Nativity on. And we're going to add all the ingredients to make a Christingle. Now I said to Chris, I'm sure I'm teaching my grandmother to suck eggs here, but he said there might be people who didn't know what the ingredients of a Christingle were. So we take an orange. We take something red to wrap around the orange. Usually we put sticky tape, but we want people to make their own Christingle. So I've got some parcel tape, but if you haven't got that, you can use red wool. And I'm also collecting red ribbon. 4 little cocktail sticks. A bag of sweets. These mini Haribos were out for Halloween, so I bought 4 boxes of 50, although I must confess that one of them now only has 49 in it. And a candle. When we've done a Christingle in Messy Church, we have used a satsuma and a birthday cake candle, which comes on its own little pointed stick. So we're going to put all of those things into the bag. We're also going to add some instructions about making a Christingle. This comes from the Church in Wales Christingle pack that was produced a few years ago. And I'm also going to add a word search, of which I have several on the Christingle theme. We're hoping to add in some liturgical resources in case there are those who don't have Zoom or YouTube. The Church in Wales produced a bilingual Christingle service a few years ago. One of my colleagues is particularly good with putting stuff online, so we're going to do something online that either people can join in with at the time or that they can watch at a time convenient to them. So we're going to have 200 Christingles in my 4 churches. So what are we going to do with them? Well, one church amongst my 4 doesn't feel up to doing something in church. They are an older, smaller congregation, but they are going to deliver to all the families in the village. They know where the children are. A previous year, they've delivered the Meaningful Chocolate Advent calendars. So they know where all the children live, and they're going to deliver 50 odd Christingles in bags to the children of the village. The other churches are going to be open, God willing, on Christmas Eve at a set point during the day for an hour or so. We're going to have somebody there. We're going to have lots of candles. We're going to have the tree lit. We're going to put the crib out. I reckon that most parents really want something to do with hyper-excited children on Christmas Eve afternoon, and that though they are used to coming to the service, they will come if we say, come visit the crib. We'll play carols, we'll have people pass through, obviously sanitized, at a distance, on a one-way system, but they can visit the church to pick up their Christingle bag. The other 2 churches, I think, are smaller. They won't need a one-way system. If it comes to it and we cannot let people pass through, then we can put the bags in the porch. People can come and pick up the bags in passing. And if we've got any left over, being as they're not already made up, the ingredients will keep, and even the oranges can be eaten. In Bangor Church, where I live, and there are flat windowsills, I usually take all my own crib sets and lay them all around the church. This year, I'm asking other people if they've got crib sets, unusual ones, foreign ones, that they can bring and lend. I want the church to be decorated plus this Christmas. Let's make the visit to the church an essential part of Christmas Eve for the people in our villages.
Sue, thank you so much. Lots of practical information there. You've obviously kind of already sat down. And I think that's part of it, isn't it, Sue? It's about sitting down well in advance, thinking about what's possible, what may not be possible this year, and just reimagining how we do things and finding creative ways to do that. So Christingle is one of the stalwarts, isn't it, of the Anglican Church coming up to Christmas time. So it's really brilliant. Some very practical things there. Interesting question that's come up, an anonymous attendee. In terms of sourcing and distributing Christingles in a bag, does it necessarily need to be an orange? Or will any fruit, as long as it's round, be suitable? It's an interesting question on a Monday afternoon, Sue.
I think people have talked about using different fruits in the past. Of course, all the little songs talk about the orange of Christingle, so you wouldn't be able to sing the song, but you could sing a different song. As long as it's round, I suppose.
Yes, as long as it's round, which is the symbolising.
I mean, you don't put them in a banana, are you? But,
no.
you know, an apple or whatever you've got, but we are providing oranges, perhaps smaller than that one. Obviously, we haven't got to the provision of oranges yet. And my husband appeared with one large orange, specially for today. So it's rather large, but it doesn't have to be that big. Particularly if you take a lot of parcel ribbon to go around a big orange. Okay, so again, thank you, Sue. It's just great to hear from somebody on the ground talking about that. Somebody's just put, Catherine just posted that I used to have a chocolate orange when they used to talk about Christingle at midnight mass, and I'll just say I'm all for that. I'm all for that. Okay. Me too, but it would cost us a lot to provide 80 in Bangor Church.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's any more questions for Sue, just pop them in the Q&As as we go along, or any comments as you do in chat. But Sue, thank you so much for sharing that with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
And we're going to go to Paulette now. And Paulette, you're going to talk to us about nativity, because that's another big thing to do with Christmas, you know, with our crib services. So can you just share a little bit about how you're planning this maybe differently this year?
Thank you very much, Chris. So I'm Paulette Gower, and missionary leader just to the west of Wrexham, so not very far from Sue. And in the same meeting I was at when we discussed Christingles with Sue, it was a case of what can we do for the nativity this year. So I will just screen share. So Bethlehem bound, bringing the Christmas story to your doorstep. Usually, as a church, we're very used to doing Christmas Eve. We've got a family nativity. We can't do it this year. During Advent, we invite the children from the schools to come with their classes to meet some of the nativity characters, to do some bits and pieces. We can't do it this year. So we asked the question of how can we take the nativity out of the church building and into the community? And there were some concerns that people expressed. You know, how do we maintain the social distancing? You know, how do we make sure we haven't got the crowds? How do we communicate the story? People were very concerned about, well, knocking on people's doors where they weren't wanted, but how would they enjoy it as well? So just imagine someone who lives on your street has told you about the Christmas story, coming to your doorstep in December. You've had a flyer through the door and have put it in your window. The children are excited, have dressed up as a star and a shepherd, and then comes a knock at the door. You open it to see an angel standing back, who introduces herself. Hello, my name is Gabriel. I'm an angel. Do you like my halo? God uses angels to give people special messages. One day I told a girl called Mary that she was going to have a baby. The baby would be very special because his dad would be God. When the baby was born, he was to be called Jesus. Jesus has now been born. And tonight I've invited a group of shepherds to go and find baby Jesus. Have you seen any of them yet? I must go and tell others the good news, but I'd like to give you this angel to remind you of the good news that the angels bring. I'll just put it here so you can pick it up. Goodbye. You pick up the wooden Christmas tree ornament she's left on the flower pot and go in and close the door. Another knock and a shepherd appears. My name is Barbara and I'm a shepherd. One of my sheep has run off and I'm looking for him. I wondered whether he'd come into your garden to eat the grass. I was bringing him to Bethlehem as a gift for the new baby. Not long ago, we were woken up by a bright light. It was an angel. I was very scared. The angel told us that Jesus was born and told us to come to Bethlehem to find him. Then lots more angels came and started singing. So here I am trying to find baby Jesus. Well, I will be when I find that missing sheep. If you do see him, please let me know. Here's a special invitation for you to join us on Christmas Eve for a Zoom crib service. I'll just leave it here so you can pick it up. The children are excited. There might be a sheep in the front garden. You pick up the invitation to the Zoom crib service on Christmas Eve. It may be a possibility, as you probably won't be going to the cinema this year. You haven't shut the door before the king appears. Well, you get the idea. The invitation is there. Different characters from the crib service can come to different doors. The social distancing is there. And maybe they can leave something that actually can invite people on to the next part. So how do we actually think about the organisation of it? Well, to us, the most important part, first of all, was prayer. And then recruiting possible helpers and a prayer team. So those maybe who can't go out could still be involved. Looking at possible streets. So first of all, those streets maybe where there's a church connection, somebody who lives there, and get them to check the interest in the streets. We had somebody come back and said, actually, we haven't had as much interest in that street, but there's this one here. So that's where we are at the minute. Then we want to finalise and then to do flyers, to invite people to put through the doors. And we decided to actually be able to work out who would like us to knock on their door. We'd get them to put the flyer in their window. The characters, the scripts and the costumes. But we thought it was nice as we went round to actually be able to give something. To actually invite, to actually just give maybe a small angel, something for the Christmas tree. But just something that people can feel that they've got something out of it as well. And maybe that the Kings might be taking a few sweets round as well. So that's the idea. I've got a handout and a flyer that gives a little bit more detail about some of the structure and the things we're thinking of that I'll get Veronica to send out for us. So that's the this sort of structure of what we're trying to do is to take the nativity into the community rather than the church coming in, people having to come into church for it.
I think that's a definite theme this year, isn't it, Paulette? About because I know from my years in ministry, almost Christmas and Easter and times like that wrote themselves in church. You're a brave person almost to change the format of services at church. And yet this year, of course, everybody's having to reimagine everything. But as we were saying with Bishop Andy, what a great opportunity actually for the church to be going out into the community this year rather than expecting people to come to us. So you're quite happy for people to get in touch and to sort of pick up on that idea?
Yes, more than happy to. You know, we've got some excited people about going out. Actually, some people they've been vying over who's dressing up as the angel and who's being shepherd.
Interesting question from Caroline. She said, Paulette, interesting, but in our very rural area with houses dotted at fair distance from each other, many non-onliners and self-isolating, any other suggestions? And I guess this is what we have to do all the time, isn't it? And I just think you can't do everything for everyone. And I think sometimes we have to understand that, you know, we're doing our very best. And whilst we can reimagine everything, we can't do everything for everybody, but we can try and make people feel involved. So, I mean, I suppose you could adapt that, couldn't you? And put out, you know, cards with that information on. It's just about making people feel involved, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like. So,
and there might be something exciting that somebody comes up with. It could be that you've got a whole family that would like to dress up, that would go around in their vehicle to some of the outlying places.
I've got a wonderful picture in my mind of that. That's a, well, we're used to seeing, I don't know about you, but we're used to seeing kind of Father Christmas and the reindeers coming around here in Cardiff, and we used to see Disney characters coming around. Again, wouldn't it be brilliant, even in the most rural of areas, to see the nativity characters kind of out and about there? Brilliant idea. So again, if, you know, in real time as we're doing this webinar, if you've got ideas, post them in the chat because people can pick up on those. And again, we've got a couple of weeks to think about this, but it's all about reimagining. So really appreciate, Paulette, about your input for that, and really got us thinking. Thank you so much for that. Next, we're going to go to Sally Humble-Jackson. Now, Sally, some of you will know, has been involved for several years now with Christmas the Story, and Sally's one of those very creative types who is just wonderful at reimagining stuff. And Sally, I know the Nativity Story in particular, real place in your heart, hasn't it? So can you just share with us a little bit this afternoon about how you are reimagining Christmas this year? I think you're on mute there, Sally, so you'll have to unmute yourself. Brilliant.
Yeah, there you are. I'm all Christmas. I'm not techie. Right. Okay. I'm Sally. I'm in my 60s, Cardiffian. My parents never went to church, but I had religious assemblies at school, wall-to-wall Jesus in RE lessons, church parade with guides and brownies, and carol services galore, which I loved because I love Christmas. Christianity was woven into our culture back then. Atheist or believer, Jesus was the role model. In my 30s, I joined a church and encountered churchianity for the first time. Bit of a shock. I'd grown up knowing the person of Christ, free from the paraphernalia of organised religion. Not to worry, I adjusted, I settled in. I taught Sunday school for 20 years, always with a crib service on Christmas Eve, when families like the one I grew up in, non-church going families, poured in through the doors to see the little ones in their costumes and hear the stories. I love teaching the children, but I especially loved it at Christmas. I've even done nativity plays with men in Cardiff prison. Fantastic. Then 11 years ago, I set up Christmas the Story, a 3-week city centre event, which means everyone can access the nativity story in the run up to Christmas without going to church. Each year, schools bring between 2,000 and 3,000 children to see the drama and the donkeys as a free school trip. Not this year, obviously. But the thing is, my heart is always with the people outside the church. I instinctively identify with them. Back in the day, Jesus would have fed us all loaves and fishes, healed us all, told us all stories about God, regardless of whether we're stony ground or thorny ground or rich, fertile soil. He excluded no one. So anyway, I'm up to my neck in the Christmas story, and I'm very conscious that in telling it for outsiders, especially children, the Bible verses have to come together as a story. People of faith might hang around to sing carols between chunks of story. People of faith might ignore the fact that Luke's version and Matthew's don't actually match. People of faith might find it fascinating that the word stable is a mistranslation, that scholars believe the Magi spent 2 years on the road, that myrrh was used to anoint the dead. But the people outside don't want all that. They just want the story. Luckily, as a writer, I know how to do it. I understand story structure. So listen, I'm going to give you gold now for free. This is how you bring all the mishmash of the Gospels together into one single gripping narrative that will have people all ages on the edge of their seats. Rule 1 of story structure, beginning and end have to match. No match, no story. It begins in Nazareth, ends in Nazareth. Forget Bethlehem. Nazareth is the match. Rule 2, we have to know what the protagonist wants at the outset. Cinders wants to go to the ball. Mary wants to marry Joseph and stay safe and sound raising kids in Nazareth near her family. Rule 3, the story has to kick off. Something happens which dashes the protagonist's hopes. Cinders is forbidden to go to the ball. An angel turns up and announces that Mary's first child is not going to be Joseph's. So where am I up to? Rule 4, you have to have increasing complications. More stuff happens to drive the protagonist further and further from their heart's desire, like Joseph not believing Mary, like the all-powerful Roman Empire insisting she take to the road a week before her due date, like giving birth unattended in a stinking stable in the middle of the night, like a bunch of hyper shepherds bursting in hours after the birth, like a pantomime villain king getting wind of your baby's existence and plotting to kill him, like 3 kings who are actually spies turning up. Okay, I know, wise men, magi, but the world outside understand kings better. Rule 5, it must build to a climax. Okay, God sorts the spy thing, but King Herod is still on the case, living just hours from Bethlehem and quite capable of slaughtering every little boy in the town. Flee to Egypt, Mary, go, girl, go. Rule 6, ending. Herod drops dead. Mary, Joseph and baby Jesus get to go home to Nazareth, happy ever after, or for 30 years in this case. This is the best known and best loved Bible story in the world, bar none. The great art galleries of the world are stuffed with illustrations. I think we adore it because it introduces us to Jesus as a newborn. All new babies are intrinsically lovable. They stir our hearts, bring lumps to our throats. They're also vulnerable, even when there is no Herod wishing them dead. Tell this story to the world beyond the faithful few, and you plant a seed of love for Jesus in every listener's heart. Don't worry whether the seed takes root. Leave that to God. But this year, all those who come once a year to have that seed of love, otherwise known as the Christmas spirit, planted in their hearts, are going to be turned away. Our regular attenders will book the limited places at the limited services, click the links to the Zoom services, leaving our Christmas-only congregations out in the cold. Even TV and radio services, which will be very special this year, won't work for many of them. Why? Because their families won't wear it. It's Christmas, for goodness sake. They'll be laughing and talking and joking and grabbing the remote of anyone who fancies a bit of church. So this year, it's really important that we churches find ways of getting that story out to places where those who need it can find it, when all the obvious routes are closed. Look, maybe I can help. I'm pulling together a 5-minute video, music, narration, Welsh and English, spectacular puppetry, which will tell the story in a way that fits with someone looking at a crib scene. There'll be links, so any of you can use this video in any way you want. In my parish, I'm hoping we can scatter mangers all over the place, in parks, outside corner shops, in cul-de-sacs near zebra crossings, mangers everywhere, all sizes, all styles, made from lolly sticks or pallets or garden prunings. We can tie QR codes to them that will take mobile phones to the video and soundtrack. We can put wrapped sweeties in them as gifts to the world. We can put pictures in them. We can remind all the grannies and grandpas that they already know the story so they can tell it to the children all by themselves, especially if they can't do the QR thing. We can go a step further, set up entire crib scenes, knitted cribs, Lego cribs, big plastered churchy ones, and we can put them outside our churches with the soundtrack playing on a loop, or the QR code. Or we can send out pictures, cards, posters with the code. We're taking our very large puppet crib scene with soundtrack plus 2 live donkeys to 30 primary schools in Cardiff this December as a COVID-friendly Christmas treat for the kids. You could do something like that if you wanted. I'd let you know how. Plus the city centre I mentioned earlier, not happening of course, but the soundtrack is a 20-minute dramatic retelling with music, again, Welsh and English versions. If you think you can use that, it's available. I'll make sure that all the details of how to get these bits and pieces are available to you as soon as I possibly can. In the meantime, as that great storyteller, Charles Dickens said, a Merry Christmas, one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. As soon as you mentioned at the beginning there about free gold, you piqued my interest, I have to say. So, I mean, we've talked already, haven't we, a lot this afternoon about how we are having to reimagine Christmas. So obviously, as somebody who's very creative, been involved with Christmas the Story, have you gone through a mixed set of emotions this year, through sort of a slight sense of despair, not being able to do what you've come to do in the last few years? Or again, do you see this as an opportunity this year of just doing something differently and creatively?
You should ask me that, Chris, because I'm going to tell you the truth. I was excited at first. I thought, oh, I've got a year off, because it's very hard to describe to anybody just how flat out I am at this time of year. And it's, you know, this is our 11th year. What was brought home to me was Marcus Rashford making us think hard about the children in deprived areas for whom lockdown was rubbish. You know, I go to church in a very leafy suburb, and I tell you, we've been sharing stuff on WhatsApp, and the children have had the time of their lives. Their parents have been fantastic. You know, they've had street parties for VE Day. They've camped inside their front rooms with tents up. And in other parts of our city, there have been children with no computers, no nothing, who've had a terrible time. And that suddenly got to me, and we own the 2 donkeys that we use in the town centre, and we realised that we could take them to schools. They are COVID friendly, equines can't get the disease and spread it, and that we could take these beautiful puppets that we have made for another Christmas venture that I've been doing the last few years, beautiful 3-foot amazing puppets. We could wire them into place and make a big crib scene. You could bring them to life a little bit, but we could only take one puppeteer, because puppeteers work shoulder to shoulder, so you can't socially distance. Just so we'd have a crib scene with one puppeteer, just to move them a little bit, and then the soundtrack. But once we got the soundtrack with a 5-minute retelling that focuses on looking at a crib scene, we thought, you know, there are cribs all over the place. There are thousands of them. Nanas can knit them, you know, we can make them. We could get this everywhere, that people stumble across without drawing a crowd.
So what you're talking about really is putting together a ready-made resource for people.
Yes.
People can get hold of. When might that resource be available, and would they do that?
The soundtrack is almost there. It's going to be there by the end of the week. We've heard all the preliminary versions,
Okay.
and it's great. And it's in Welsh and it's in English, music and narration, and told specifically as if you were looking just at a classic crib scene. Mary, Joseph, baby, kings, shepherds, maybe a couple of sheep. Forget the sheep, doesn't matter. You know, you could have a knitted one on the counter in a corner shop. You could have them outdoors, just in random places. Who cares if they get nicked or ruined? You know, in a way, it doesn't matter. Just have them there. If you have a laminated card with it, with a QR code on it, people with their mobile phones can go straight to the soundtrack and can listen to the music, looking at whatever crib scene is in front of them. And we could make that happen everywhere.
So when that's finalised, Sally, can you let us know
Yeah.
that, and then we can push that out?
Yeah,
It's a
by all means.
ready-made resource for people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Really
welcome.
appreciate that. And you've already wished us a Merry Christmas, so I'll wish you a Merry Christmas. That's probably the first Merry Christmas I've offered this year round, so there we go. But thank you, Sally, for that. Right, next up we have somebody that's fairly synonymous with Christmas as well, and that's Di Woolridge. I well remember one of the first tasks every year is getting in touch with the Bible Society and looking on the website, or getting in touch with Di and looking at the resources that are out there. Di, you've made some brilliant resources available to us over many, many years, and we're hoping you're going to inspire us this afternoon as well.
Bless you, Chris. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. How are we all doing? I would say it's lovely to see you all, but I can't see you all. But if I could, I would say it is lovely to see you. It's great to be with you this afternoon, and just so encouraged to hear of all that's happening already, and really appreciated Sally sharing what she's up to this Christmas as well. So thank you so much for having me, Chris. Right, guys, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen and just kind of take you through a kind of fast track of some of the resources we've put together at Bible Society for this Christmas. So bear with me as I just share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you guys will be able to see this now. As kind of Chris alluded to, one of the things that we're passionate about in Bible Society is creating Christmas resources, namely children's booklets, actually. And I had the great privilege of being involved in writing one of our earlier ones, The Well Good News of Christmas. And it was just so inspiring to see how churches kind of up and down the country just took a hold of it as a great opportunity to just be the church on mission, really, and to be blessing schools, communities, you know, children that come along to carol services. So this year we've got a new children's booklet out, and it's called It Begins in Bethlehem, written by a good friend of mine, Bob Hartman, and it's adapted from his best-selling book, The Reimagined Bible. He's done a Christmas poem, and we've put a kind of brand new spread of illustrations together by Mark Beach with that as well. And what we've done with this resource, guys, is we've made it a kind of three-pronged resource, essentially. So you've got It Begins in Bethlehem, which is the booklet, and it's an opportunity to just give as many booklets out as you'd like to, really, to try and bless and encourage your community, maybe kind of give them into schools, even if you can't go live. And we've got a missional discount available for churches with that as well. So you can order £2 for one, but then that drops down to £1 per copy if you order 10 or more. And even 60p a copy if you order more than 100. So the real heart behind it is that we want it to be just a missional opportunity to share the good news of Christmas with children this year. So you've got the booklet. There's also a video, which there is every year as well. And you've got the one and only Bob Hartman narrating that, and you can show that in your carol services if you want as well. So that's sort of free to stream and broadcast on Zoom or Facebook Live or YouTube or whatever it is that you're using with your church for this year's carol service. But alongside that, we've also got the instant nativity, and I've got a sneak peek for you guys if you've not already seen. So what the instant nativity is a kind of pre-packaged retelling of the story Bob's written but for churches to put on themselves. So you can get someone who's maybe a experienced, confident reader who would sort of narrate the story, and then you encourage people within the church to get involved in the actions. We've done 2 versions, as I'm probably sure you can imagine. We did one initially based on churches meeting live, and as we know, that's going to be tricky this year. So we've also done an online version. So would really encourage you to check that out. Here's a snapshot, a taster of some of the images, which I think is just really fun and whimsical, and will just capture the children's imagination. So that's a free resource, and you can have a look at that at biblesociety.org.uk/Christmas. And as well as doing resources for children, I've written a book which is aimed at adults actually, and young adults as well. So it's telling the story of Christmas through wordplay, which I very much get a kick out of, if I'm honest with you. And it's using the wordplay of mess to just share and unwrap the Christmas story. So I've kind of done it in 3. You can see a bit of a rhythm here, guys, can't you? 3. But the key message kind of captures the Christmas story through mess, message, and Messiah. So it basically lands the kind of the gospel story through Christmas, through Jesus's birth, with the fact that Jesus was born in the mess for our mess. And here's just a little taster of what's inside. So I wanted to make it a book that was playful. There's elements of poetry in there as well, kind of conversational poetry, which is, I guess, part of my style. And I've got a copy of the book here as well. And there's kind of pub quiz-esque questions that helps people perhaps find out truths about what's actually in the Christmas story. So, you know, picking up on certain things like, was Jesus born in a stable, or was he born in the downstairs part of an old stone house? And so maybe kind of picking up on some of the preconceptions we've got with Christmas to just reveal interesting information, but unwrapping the Christmas story for people in a playful way. I share a bit about my story in there as well, about losing my dad just after Christmas. And the reality of Christmas is it's a messy time of year. And I actually wrote this story last year before COVID came on. And I just felt that the message of the messiness has never been more sort of apt than this year, really. And so I felt it was really important to ground that in just relating to COVID and what we've experienced. So I've written a postcard that just connects Jesus as the one who put in the perfect shift for us, so we don't have to be socially distanced from God. So it earths the messiness of Christmas, but it points to the Messiah of Christmas, that he was born in the mess for our mess. So I just kind of pick up on that, really. And similar to Bob's book, I want to make that just a resource for churches to grab and use. We just want to make it available. So we're printing copies, and you can put them in hampers. You can give them out to neighbors. And so we're making those at a missional discount for church leaders. So you can check that out at the Christmas webpage as well. And then finally, as I see Chris has come back on, I'm going to wrap things up very quickly. I've literally just this Friday filmed a spoken word for Christmas. And there's me looking very serious in a suit. But I wanted to come up with something that was light. It's interesting, Bishop Andy was talking about light in the darkness earlier. And I think I wanted to create something that would bring a bit of light relief for people in a really difficult year, but also land it in a profound way. So that's a snapshot for that. And I'm making that spoken word film available for churches to download, stream, broadcast on carol services as well. So that'll be coming out on November the 30th, if you're interested. So that's me, guys. And that's a snapshot of some of the Christmas resources we've got on offer.
That's brilliant, Di. As ever, they look as exciting as ever. You said by the end of November that spoken word should be available.
Yes, that's the hope. I'm getting the first cut through on Wednesday, but we've been striving to get it out ready for the 1st of December for churches to use. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled either at my site spokentruth.com or the Bible Society Christmas webpage. And they'll be available for churches to use, to share on social media, or to stream in carol services.
Okay, and a question from Delith. How many of those resources will be available in Welsh this year, Di?
So great question, Dereth. So all the written material, bar my Christmas book, has been produced in Welsh. So all of Bob Hartman's resources for children, the Instant Nativity, the video has been done in Welsh as well, narrated by a good friend of mine, Katie Hadley, and of course the booklets as well. So that's all available in Welsh. And if you go to the Christmas page, you can access all those resources there.
That's brilliant. Do you get to have a long lie down come January, Di?
Oh, I hope so, Chris. I hope. I'm not going to lie. No, I think in all seriousness, it's a busy time of year, I think, for everyone, isn't it? And I think you've alluded to it already. Everyone's kind of scratching their heads thinking, how do we engage people, with the story of Jesus this Christmas in ways we haven't tried before? And I think we're all kind of stepping out of the boat to some degree, but I don't think there's been a moment where it's been needed more. But I think there's a real openness as well, isn't there? So I just encourage guys to kind of go out there and engage neighbours, communities and churches.
Okay, just two quick questions before Jane. Jane has been waiting very patiently all the way through. Thank you, Jane. Just two very practical ones. First of all, from Cass, copyright permission to embed any of the videos in YouTube. Is there copyright implications with these?
No, there shouldn't be. I think what I'd encourage church leaders to do is to download the videos from our website. So if you kind of rip it off YouTube, because we do make them available to watch on YouTube. If you do that, there will be issues. But if you go to our webpage, biblesociety.org.uk/Christmas, you'll be able to download them from source, and then there should be no issues.
Okay, brilliant. And one from Alison. Is it okay to put the Bible Society resources on a parish Facebook page?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think there's any problems with that. No, I don't think I'll get shouted at for saying that. I mean, the reality.
You said it now.
This is your to use and share, and I think we're very aware, as well as many people, that we want to bless churches this Christmas. So yeah, please feel free to do that.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Really brilliant. Thank you for spending time with us, and I hope you get some peace and quiet once all this work is out of the way, Di. But thank you very much for your time this afternoon and for making those resources available to us. Much appreciated.
Bless you, Chris. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mark. And Jane, thank you so much for waiting. I said at the beginning I had a feeling that today was going to run over a little bit, so apologies that you've been waiting patiently there. You're going to talk to us just for a couple of minutes this afternoon to finish off about how you've kind of reimagined your fairly traditional Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So, and you're joining us from sunny Newcastle, is that correct?
I am indeed. It's been lovely to hear of all the ideas today. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I've served in Carlisle, in Barrow-in-Furness, in York, and now I'm in Newcastle. I arrived last December and it's been a very strange year indeed. But in York, every single week, without fail, someone would ask, are you Welsh or Geordie? And so today I'm in Geordie land talking to the church in Wales. How good is all of that? So I'm very pleased. I'm just going to share my screen with you so that we can see what's happening. So just so that you don't spend the next few minutes trying to work out where my accent is from. It's from Carlisle in the northwest of England. But now to the topic in hand. What will Christmas Day and Christmas Eve look like, and how will the sacrament of the Eucharist fit in this Christmas? Christmas is full of crib services, carol services, midnight masses, Christmas Day services, and what a joy it is. And from what I've heard today, the Church in Wales will be adding a lot more to the work at Christmas time. So that's Christmas services usually sorted for us all. If the First Minister or the Prime Minister tells us that we can have carol services in our churches, we can do that at the drop of the hat because we've done it for such a long time. But there are lots of other traditions and rituals as well. The families who have the traditions of giving and receiving hospitality, of giving and receiving gifts, of giving and receiving good wishes, the Christmas jumpers, the party games, the walk perhaps to a care home, and of course going to church. And for those who go to church at all this Christmas, it will of course depend on the restrictions that are in place, but there are some things we need to be very mindful of this year, that emotions are heightened. It's been a tough time and a lot more to go yet, and so we need to be very careful with what we're doing in our services. Sentimentality always comes in at Christmas. Sometimes it's very good because rituals and traditions are based on all of those things. We have our slushy Victorian carols and so on. And there's been a lot of tears around this year. So I think in our churches, we have to be very careful that we don't manipulate people into making them burst into tears. Many years ago, I went to a hospital chapel service where mums and dads from many years went to remember their babies who'd died in pregnancy, who died during birth, or died post-birth. And afterwards, because I was doing some research, I was able to talk to some of the women in particular who were present. The nurses had put the service together and they downloaded Kylie Minogue Somewhere Over the Rainbow and played it in the middle of the service. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. But when I spoke to the people afterwards to ask why they were there and what they got from it, many of them told me that they'd been going to that service for years, 12, 15, 20 years, not because they wanted to remember their babies, because they did that day in and day out, but because they wanted to support the chaplain, who'd been very kind at the time. And when I spoke to the chaplain about it afterwards, he wondered why he went home every year with a carrier bag full of bottles of wine and whiskey and so on. And he began to question why on earth he was doing that service. So we have to ask what we're doing and watch these heightened emotions that are around. And of course, this year, because funerals have been so different, where lots of people can't attend, grief is still very raw for a lot of people, and Christmas might make it worse for them. But of course, we do accept that there'll be some excitement. When I was in York, we used to do about 20 carol services a year. So you can imagine doing a rota for all of that. But St. Nicholas's in Gosforth, it was going to be looking like this, with Eucharist, a crib service, lessons and carols, a midnight mass, and on Christmas Day, Holy Communion, parish Eucharist, and then 2 days later, because it's Sunday, an 8 o'clock communion and a 10 o'clock parish Eucharist. But this year, because of the trying to be COVID secure in our churches, between all of those services, there would have to be a lot of cleaning going on. And I can't imagine going from, we are still in lockdown restrictions, from where we are now to a church full of people. So we're imagining that our risk assessments are still going to be the same as they were before this lockdown. So we've decided there'll be no midnight mass, there'll be no 10 o'clock Eucharist, there'll be no Christmas service, but we will have some kinds of lessons and carols. It'll be a few people in church, and all of that is to manage. We're waiting to see what we can do with singers and so on. And the church council, when I talked to them about it, they of course want everything to be in. And so I challenged them a little bit, because we need to recognise that clergy and laity are tired. There are some people who thrive on new ideas and will go off and do all kinds of things, but there are other people who just can't cope with that. And we've done a lot of learning this year. We've learned all about tech. We've learned about the strange world we're living in. We've learned that we have to worry even more about church finances, and we worry how we serve our communities. So I'm asking that we just take a little time and recognise all of that, and it's okay not to do the whole calendar of events that we would usually do. But we do ask a question: how do we reach more people than would usually come to church? The 300 at the crib service, the 300 at the carol service, the hundreds that would come to midnight mass and Christmas Day services. But there's a great opportunity to connect with families and friends. And I've heard many ideas today, and these are both locally and globally. I love surprises and like seeing God in the surprises. So we've been using Zoom for quite a while now, even though our church is open. And in France or Germany, Australia, or in the Lebanon, the younger ones in particular, to come and read at a service for us on Zoom, or to record it so that we can play it in the service. And their parents and grandparents are just delighted when they get this lovely surprise of hearing and seeing their family. So you can have readers from all over the place, you can have intercessions from all over the place. And this year in particular, we're looking at the use of candles, which we see in churches, and how we can in our homes too during the services. We can have people leading parts of the service. We can have people leading the creed, the Lord's Prayer, leading the responses so that it fits really well on Zoom. And of course, we're working out how to do carols, which in church might be with a small group of singers if we're allowed to do that, or it might be some recording, or it might be from our cathedral. Who knows what we're going to do yet. But for those who are missing the sacrament of the Eucharist and being unable to take communion, we've been using the act of spiritual reception. So this is just some of the words that are in our liturgy at the moment. And I think it would be a lovely idea to add those to the material that we send out to the parishes, so that people who don't usually come to church except at Christmas time might be able to join in with an act of spiritual reception, and it might make them engage a bit better with churches. I don't want to be in the position of saying, stop, you can't come in, because our risk assessment says, please go away, the church is full. So we have to be able to manage all of that. We have a booking system for attendance in church. We use Zoom and we use telephone, we'll use Christmas cards and leaflets, video streaming, but more importantly, somehow we have to be present. So we're having an Advent calendar with lots of different trails across Gosford in Newcastle, schools involved, the shepherds, the innkeepers, the angels trails. And on the last Sunday of Advent and on Christmas Eve, when you go to see the windows, which build up over 24 days in the world, then carols blaring in the streets.
I thought we'd lost you there for a moment, Jane.
Oh no, you're back.
We just had a little interruption there, but
Okay,
we got the visual, so that's fine.
that's okay. And it might end up with a candlelit church art, so that all can sing, all glory be to God on high, and to the earth be peace. And don't forget at the end of all of this that we owe a great deal of thanks to lots of different people by the time we get to the end of Christmas, and that will be an opportunity to say thank you to everybody, but also to invite them to Epiphany, to Candlemas, and so on. A very important thing to do.
Jane, really appreciate you spending time with us this afternoon. It's such a shame that we've run out of time, because there are so many practical questions that were just coming into my head about the practicalities of Christmas this year that I would love to have put to you as well. But really grateful that you've joined us from Newcastle. I've always found it amazing accent, actually, one of my very favorite. So the fact that you've got mistaken as a Welsh lady as well, it just adds to it for me. So just to thank you for all you've brought this afternoon, and to thank you for your contribution, and to wish you all the best, and I hope that you find some space in your busy schedule over Christmas for yourself as well. So thank you.
Will do, thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And thank you to all of you. I do apologise again that we've gone so far over time. I had a feeling when we put the lineup together, so many good speakers, so much practical information to get through, that we might run over. So thank you to all of you that's stayed with us. Lots of information to get through. So as I said at the beginning, it will get put onto the St. Padan's website over the next couple of days. Go back to it again, and we'll put as many handouts and information and links on there as we possibly can. So if I don't see you again, have a really good Christmas from me as well. Take care.